This is Damian Reed, a 33-year-old devoted father of three with everything going for him. He had a bright future ahead, a family he adored, and a career that seemed poised for success. But in one explosive moment, all of that was violently ripped away. His world came crashing down when his wife, in a fit of blind rage, shot him dead after she caught him checking her Facebook account. In the early hours of February 23, 2025, at around 9:30 a.m., police were jolted by a 911 call. On the other end of the line was a nurse, her voice shaking with fear and panic. She told the dispatcher, breathless and desperate, that she had just shot her husband and needed immediate help. When law enforcement arrived at their home on the 5300 block of Hollow Drive, they were confronted with a scene that would haunt them for years. Damian was found lying lifeless on the floor, a single gunshot wound to his chest. But what seemed like a senseless act of violence was far more complex than anyone had imagined. As investigators dug into the couple's history, they uncovered the unsettling truth. Damian had been killed over a single moment of suspicion, his attempt to check his wife's Facebook account. Before we get to the night when this unthinkable tragedy happened, we need to go back to the beginning, where the story seemed ordinary. But like many cases we've covered, the most dangerous stories are the ones that lull us into believing nothing could go wrong. Rashawn Wallace was born in 1990. She grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, a 30-year-old woman with big dreams and a determination to build something meaningful for herself and her family.
Private school, expensive. Private hospital, expensive. Private jet, expensive. But you want my private part for free? Ah! Hey!
Little did she know, one day she would be spending the rest of her life in the four walls of a jail cell for murder. She gained some attention early on for her attempt to break into the rap scene. While her music career didn't quite take off, Rashawn channeled that same drive into a more stable path.
Hey, cost all the money just drip like this. Woo! Bitch, you better watch my kicks. These double C's on my feet. Bitch, you better not play with me. It costs when you fucking with me. These bitches ain't fucking for free. Ho, get the fuck off my line.
She became a nurse by profession, but she also had a creative spirit that shone through in her side hustle as an entrepreneur. She had a love for social media, but it wasn't just about staying connected. It was about building her brand, her identity, and her business. As a mother and a wife, Rashawn was committed to creating a better life for her children.
Watch the road, watch the road.
Bro, how you driving? You just turn this on. Dawson, we gotta turn.
She was driven, ambitious, and social, balancing her demanding career with her entrepreneurial endeavors. Her life was full of energy, ambition, and a sense of purpose, but it was also one fraught with challenges. Her marriage to Damian Reed, a 33-year-old man from Atlanta, Georgia, was complicated. They shared a home, 2 children, and a love that appeared strong on the outside, but had been eroding for months. Damian Reed, a man with humble beginnings, worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Known for his determination and drive, Damian wanted to build a legacy, a home, and a future for his loved ones. As a father, Damian threw himself into his new role. He was present, attentive, and dedicated, making sure his children wanted for nothing. As a husband, he appeared supportive, always by Rashawn's side through the everyday challenges of life. Those who knew him well often spoke of Damian as someone with clear ambitions. He talked about his goals for building wealth and leaving a legacy for his family. Though the details of his income were somewhat unclear, the results were visible. Financial security, comfort, and a lifestyle that turned heads. He was fiercely protective of his family, but that same love started to feel like a cage to Rashawn. The two had met in Jackson, Mississippi, a city they both moved to for a fresh start. Their connection was instant, fueled by a shared chemistry and a desire for a better life. They married, built a family, and to the outside world, it looked perfect. Their social media pages were filled with smiling family photos, captions of love and togetherness, and hashtags that spoke of happiness. The couple projected an image of a happy, flawless partnership. Their posts were filled with coordinated outfits, romantic dinners, and family adventures, creating the illusion of a bond that was admired, envied, and seemingly unbreakable. But behind those pictures was a marriage under stress, cracks hidden beneath the surface, and a growing tension between them. Meanwhile, Rashawn often shared heartfelt, romantic messages about Damien, her captions overflowing with praise and love for her husband. To their followers, their relationship seemed like the ideal marriage. But, as is often the case, what was shown online didn't capture the whole truth. Rashawn's growing obsession with her online persona started to strain their connection. Constantly on her phone, networking and engaging with followers, she became increasingly absorbed in her digital world, pulling further away from the life they shared at home. Soon, Rashawn started to feel suffocated by the increasing suspicion and control from Damien. Rashawn's growing network of online acquaintances gradually became a source of tension in her marriage. What began as harmless connections soon turned into a recurring point of friction. Damien found himself unsettled by the constant notifications, late-night scrolling, and cryptic messages that seemed to consume her attention. He couldn't always explain why, but something about it felt wrong, like a quiet intrusion into their relationship that he couldn't ignore. Friends close to the couple noticed the change too. They saw how Rashawn's phone rarely left her hand, how conversations at home were interrupted by alerts, and how Damien's frustration seemed to build with each passing week. When he voiced his concerns, Rashawn dismissed them as paranoia, insisting her online activity was nothing more than professional networking for her nursing career. But Damien wasn't convinced. It wasn't simple jealousy, it was a deeper unease, a gnawing sense that he was slowly losing his wife to a digital world he couldn't access or control. That feeling weighed on him day and night, eroding the trust that once anchored their marriage. He tried to mask his worry, but the cracks were visible. What Damien could not have known was how this seemingly small conflict would spiral into something far more dangerous. The tension over a phone, over messages and online connections would ultimately ignite a confrontation that cost him his life. It all began on February 23, 2025, a day that seemed no different from any other. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Jackson, Mississippi. Rashawn and Damien were at home, each in their own routine. Damien was in the kitchen making coffee, while Rashawn sat in bed scrolling through her phone. That was when something happened. A Facebook friend request. For most people, this would have been a simple decision, either accept or decline. But for Rashawn and Damien, it was the spark that ignited a volatile situation. Damien, already feeling increasingly suspicious about Rashawn's online activity, noticed the notification. He casually asked, "Who's that?" Rashawn, dismissing the concern as insignificant, replied, "Just someone from work." But to Damien, this was just one more instance of what he felt was a breach of trust. Their arguments about her social media activity had been escalating for months, and this felt like the breaking point. He pushed for more answers, demanding to see her phone. Rashawn hesitated. That moment of hesitation, small as it was, seemed to confirm Damien's worst fears. What started as a simple disagreement quickly escalated. Rashawn reluctantly handed over her phone, but as Damien scrolled through the messages and likes, his frustration grew. What Damien saw on the screen confirmed his worst fears. He traced the activity and found not just the friend request, but a string of online interactions he didn't recognize. He was convinced that something was going on. What might have seemed like innocent networking to Rashawn felt like a betrayal to him. He accused her of hiding things, of being disrespectful. When Damien finally confronted Rashawn about her online activity, the response he received cut deep. Instead of acknowledging his concerns, she brushed them aside, labeling his worries as irrational and unfounded. To her, his unease was nothing more than insecurity spiraling out of control. For Damien, those words weren't just dismissive, they were devastating. He had hoped for reassurance, some sign that his fears were misplaced, but instead, he was met with cold denial. The dismissal didn't calm him, it only intensified the storm brewing inside. As the argument became louder, the tension in the house thickened. Neighbors later reported hearing the shouting, but no one intervened. Inside the house, Rashawn felt cornered. Damien's accusations were intensifying, and she began to fear for her safety. This wasn't just a heated argument anymore, it was a confrontation where her physical and emotional security felt at risk. In a panic, Rashawn inched toward the drawer by the bed. Inside was a registered 9mm handgun. She reached for the gun. Rashawn later claimed she only intended to scare Damien, to make him back off. She fired a warning shot into the ceiling, hoping the noise would stop the fight, but it didn't stop. Damien, still enraged, continued to approach her. At that moment, Rashawn's fear turned into something else, desperation. She raised the gun again, this time firing a second shot. The bullet struck Damien in the chest. He collapsed almost instantly. What had started as a routine Sunday morning with coffee brewing in the kitchen and a woman scrolling through her immediately tried to save Damien. She performed CPR, desperately trying to revive him. She called 911, sobbing uncontrollably, but it was too late. Damien was pronounced dead at the scene. The police arrived soon after, and Rashawn was arrested. She was charged with murder, with her bond set at $50,000.
The woman who allegedly shot and killed her husband was given a $50,000 bond in Jackson Municipal Court today. Police say around 11:30 yesterday morning, 30-year-old Rashawn Wallace shot and killed 33-year-old Damien Reed after he allegedly attacked her. It happened on Brook Hollow Drive in Jackson. Wallace is charged with murder.
The scene at their home on Brook Hollow Drive was unlike any the officers had seen before. A house that had once been filled with the sounds of family laughter now stood silent. The investigation into Damien's death began immediately. Police focused on the gunshot wound, the 9mm handgun, and Rashawn's statements. Rashawn claimed self-defense. She had acted out of fear. She said she never meant to kill him, only to stop him from approaching her. The detectives, however, had to dig deeper. They examined the timeline of the events leading up to the shooting, the interactions between the couple, and Rashawn's version of what had happened. Neighbors were interviewed, and Rashawn's claims about the fight were put under scrutiny. How had the situation escalated so quickly? Why didn't Rashawn run or lock herself in another room? These were all questions that would have to be answered in court. When investigators examined Rashawn's phone activity, they uncovered something unusual. Just minutes before the shooting, she had logged out of her Facebook account and wiped her browser history. For detectives, this wasn't the behavior of someone caught off guard. It looked deliberate, calculated. That discovery raised troubling questions. Had Rashawn anticipated that Damien was about to uncover something incriminating? Was she trying to erase digital traces before the confrontation escalated? If so, the narrative of self-defense began to look less convincing. Detectives debated the possibilities. On one hand, the evidence suggested premeditation. On the other, they knew proving intent would be difficult. Still, the timing of her actions cast a long shadow over her claim that she acted only to protect herself. The case shifted from a straightforward domestic dispute to something far more complex. Investigators now had to weigh whether this was truly a desperate act of survival or the culmination of a plan Rashawn had set in motion. Either way, the self-defense argument was already standing on fragile ground. As the investigation progressed, a deeper, more complicated picture emerged. Rashawn's career as a nurse had made her a respected member of her community, but her marriage to Damien was far from perfect. The tension between them had been building for months. Damien's jealousy and Rashawn's need for independence through social media created a rift that neither of them knew how to fix. The public reaction to the case was immediate and divided. Some people sympathized with Rashawn, claiming she was a victim of domestic violence, pushed to her breaking point by her husband's jealousy and controlling behavior. Others believed that Rashawn had crossed the line, that the shooting was a result of unchecked rage, not self-defense. The case sparked a larger conversation about self-defense, relationships, and the dangers of unchecked emotions in the digital age. Rashawn's actions were dissected on social media, with many women rallying behind her, arguing that her fear and frustration were valid. However, others pointed to the warning shot as evidence that Rashawn had control over the situation, raising doubts about her self-defense claim. As the investigation into Damien Reed's tragic death unfolded, the focus shifted to the key question: was this a case of self-defense or a tragic overreaction fueled by anger and fear? law enforcement took their time carefully reviewing all available evidence. In the aftermath of the shooting, Rashawn Wallace, the 30-year-old nurse who had spent years saving lives, now found herself at the center of a deadly conflict of her own making. The police first began by scrutinizing Rashawn's own words. She had made it clear in her 911 call that she did not mean to kill Damien. She claimed she fired a warning shot into the ceiling and that the second shot was unintentional, fired in panic as Damien allegedly moved toward her. She had no idea that her actions would have such dire consequences. Investigators found that the couple had argued frequently in the weeks leading up to the fatal morning. What had once been a loving relationship had become strained by Damien's increasing paranoia about Rashawn's social media activity. The friend request that ignited the argument that morning was just one small piece of a much larger picture. Damien had been increasingly suspicious of his wife's interactions online, accusing her of engaging in inappropriate communication with men. Rashawn, on the other hand, felt that her husband's behavior was controlling and stifling. Her growing need for space and independence clashed with his desire to keep her close, especially in the digital age where boundaries can sometimes blur. Police were able to gather statements from neighbors who confirmed that they had heard shouting in the house moments before the gunshots rang out. Yet, as is often the case in domestic disputes, no one had intervened. By the time the officers arrived on the scene, Damien Reed was already dead, and Rashawn was sitting in stunned silence, her hands still trembling, covered in blood, begging her husband to stay alive. Despite her obvious distress, detectives couldn't ignore the possibility that Rashawn's actions may have been motivated by something more than self-defense. They turned to the evidence. The warning shot fired into the ceiling was a key point of contention. If Rashawn was truly in fear for her life, why had she shot the gun into the ceiling? Some argued that firing a warning shot was an indication that she was in control of the situation and could have chosen a different course of action. The gunshot that killed Damien also raised questions. Rashawn claimed that Damien continued to advance toward her, demanding the gun. In her defense, she said she had no choice but to shoot. But without Damien's testimony, the case was left with one narrative, Rashawn's. Investigators had to look at the physical evidence, the position of the body, the trajectory of the bullet, and the overall scene in the house. There were other details that would be crucial in the trial. For instance, the fact that Rashawn had taken the time to call 911 and perform CPR suggested that she may not have had the intent to kill her husband. Yet this did little to alleviate the doubts that the prosecution would surely raise. Why didn't she just leave the room? Why didn't she lock herself away in another part of the house? The questions surrounding Rashawn's decision-making that morning only seemed to grow as the investigation progressed. As the trial loomed, Rashawn's life began to unravel. The woman who had once been a respected nurse and mother now faced the possibility of spending the rest of her life in prison. Her nursing license was suspended, and her career, a career she had worked so hard to build, was effectively over. The stability she had fought for was gone in an instant. Her children were left without their father, and now it was uncertain whether they would ever see their mother again. With Rashawn facing charges of murder, the case seemed to divide the community into two camps. Some saw her as a woman pushed to the edge by years of controlling behavior and emotional abuse, while others saw her actions as a tragic overreaction that couldn't be justified by any amount of fear or frustration. The trial, which was set for later in the year, would give both sides the chance to present their evidence and make their case. But even as the legal battle continued, the consequences of the shooting were already being felt. A life was lost. A woman's future was uncertain. Children would grow up without both of their parents, and a neighborhood, once filled with the sounds of a family, was now quiet, silent, except for the whispers of what had happened behind closed doors. In the end, the question remains, was this a tragic accident, a moment of fear and desperation, or was it murder, a choice made in a moment of rage? As the legal system takes its course, the tragedy of Brook Hollow Drive serves as a painful reminder of how quickly things can escalate, how small actions like a Facebook friend request can set off a chain of events that no one can undo. The loss of Damian Reed sent shockwaves through the community, leaving family, friends, and colleagues grappling with the sudden void his absence created. Damian was remembered not only as vibrant and ambitious, but also as someone who carried a quiet determination to build a meaningful life. He had dreams of advancing his career, supporting his loved ones, and creating stability for the future, a future that was tragically cut short. In the days following his death, tributes poured in. Friends spoke of his generosity and humor, recalling how he could light up a room with his presence. Neighbors remembered his willingness to lend a hand, whether it was fixing something around the house or simply offering encouragement. For his family, the grief was immeasurable. They had lost a son, a brother, and a man whose potential seemed limitless. What had once been a love story between Damian and Rashawn now stood as a cautionary tale. Their relationship, outwardly ordinary and even enviable, unraveled in a way that revealed the hidden dangers of mistrust and unchecked emotion. The tragedy underscored how fragile relationships can become when communication breaks down and resentment festers. Community leaders and advocates pointed to Damian's death as a reminder of the urgent need around awareness around domestic conflict and the devastating consequences of impulsive decisions. His story became part of a larger conversation about the role of social media in relationships, the presence of firearms in domestic disputes, and the importance of intervention before tensions escalate beyond repair. Damian's life, full of promise and potential, was ended in a moment fueled by suspicion and anger. His memory now serves as both a tribute to the man he was and a warning of how quickly love can turn to tragedy when trust erodes and emotions spiral out of control. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.